Welcome to Inclusion Bites, your sanctuary for bold conversations that spark change. I'm Joanne Lockwood, your guide on this journey of exploration into the heart of inclusion, belonging, and societal transformation. Ever wondered what it truly takes to create a world where everyone not only belongs, but thrives? You're not alone. Join me as we uncover the unseen, challenge the status quo, and share stories that resonate deep within. Ready to dive in? Whether you're sipping your morning coffee or winding down after a long day, let's connect, reflect, and inspire action together. Don't forget, you can be part of the conversation too. Reach out to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk to share your insights or to join me on the show. So adjust your earbuds and settle in. It's time to ignite the spark of inclusion with Inclusion Bites. And today is episode 160 with the title, The Power of Honest Storytelling. And I have the absolute honor and privilege to welcome Nick Elston. Nick is a keynote speaker, a transformational speaking coach, and founder of Forging People. And he is dedicated to empowering individuals to embrace their voice, share their stories, and foster meaningful connections through authentic communication. When I asked Nick to describe his superpower, he said that it is turning vulnerability into a powerful tool for connection and transformation. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe. It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, and we were just chatting just now, and we worked out that we both write for HR Zone, and that's kind of how we connected.
Yeah, we do. Great publication, and great to have met you along the way as well. In 2018, we worked out from the LinkedIn connection buttons. A long time in the making, but I'm sure we'll make this worth it.
We'll figure it out. I think back in the early days when I just started in this field, I was clicking and connect on everybody that you can find. So yeah, that's probably
well, I'm glad I hit your random button.
Yeah, I now use AI tools to do it for me, so I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
We called this episode "The Power of Honest Storytelling," and looking at what you do and your superpower. How has the storytelling been built for you, and what's the authenticity and the vulnerability? How do you use that as a strength?
I think for me, it comes from my own personal journey. So for context, the nutshell version, I have mental illness. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, which largely is managed nowadays, but I developed it back in my childhood. And as I got older, left pretty much untreated because I am that old. It wasn't something that was treated the way it would be now. It then morphed into something called generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. And as I got older, it started to kind of really take over my life. In my professional career, I was running for around a decade at a really high state of burnout. And then I had a breakdown in 2012. And it was at that point I started to use speaking as a therapy. And what I found was being able to share your experiences and your story and your thoughts and your insights. And bearing in mind, I did this initially in a professional environment. We didn't do that in 2012. What I found was, despite what you hear on the news and popular media and social media, humans are essentially good. Go figure, who knew? Humans do want to support you if you only tell them what you need. And what I found was by sharing my experiences with them, in a professional environment, people started sharing their stuff with me. And I think for me, that's kind of where I learned that speaking without the filter, speaking with authenticity and vulnerability, words that have been hugely hijacked since, to be fair, it builds a bridge of trust and connection and depth with people far more than any superficial message we're ever trained to deliver in professional environments, for sure. That's where it started for me. I started to speak more and more about my experiences. The rooms got bigger, the audiences got bigger. I started to travel the world doing this stuff, and the rest, they say, is history. But along the way, and in this spirit of honesty, you can only spend so long speaking about your story, especially professionally when it really took off, before your story starts to own you again. And that's when I started to coach other people to share their stories. And that's really what's thrown me into the world that you operate in, into the realm of other people's experiences and how we can be defined by those stories as a negative force, or actually they can be a catalyst for positive change. And that's where it started for me.
I hear what you're saying there in terms of if you keep telling that story, it becomes all of you. If you're not careful, you end up living in the past, because often these stories are historical. And there's an old adage, isn't it? You speak from the scar, not from the wound. So you have to be kind of in a good place to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I go through phases of telling my story, my journey, my canon, if you like, where I came from and how I am who I am. And over time, if you're not careful, it drags you back 10 years. And sometimes it's hard to remember the story with any accuracy. So you have to use a facsimile of your story that is relevant to the audience without necessarily being the whole truth and nothing but the truth. A good illustration, and you're pulling out key points, aren't you? So that's the challenge for people, I guess.
It is a challenge. And don't get me wrong, I still very much use my platform, whether it be from the stage or from writing, as therapy. It makes HR people very nervous, but it's very real. I will share what's going through my head right now in front of a live audience. I think it's a really healthy thing. But that being said, as you say, actually, the further you come away from your story, your experiences, especially if it's a real kind of big, kind of powerful, impactful moment in your life, you do see it very differently. The context kind of changes. I think also because our lives have other parts and players as well. So when you first start sharing your experiences, you're kind of respectful of other people's thoughts on these things. The story can impact other people. That changes too, the more that we get used to being more vulnerable. I guess my rule of thumb on this is to treat your story as an evolution. So the same story that I told as therapy in 2012 is the same story I get paid to speak all over the world delivering now. The one difference is it's changed with time, it's changed with me, it's changed with experiences, with learnings, with connections. So if we start to see our story as a work in progress, we're not constantly kind of reaffirming the story that we told initially.
Yeah, no, it's also hard to keep telling the same. It can be quite boring telling the same story. You take, oh, here we go again. Here's my life. I want to spice it up a bit, or this time I'll put that in there. Or sometimes it depends on who you're talking to and why you're there and what they want to hear, doesn't it?
It does, and I think this is the thing, you see, that no one cares as much as we think they do. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. That you could be the most exciting A-list celebrity, but after 15 minutes of talking to an audience, they're going to want to know what's in it for them. And I think that's kind of the thing, really, is when you're telling your story, it's about showcasing the value of your experiences, not just your experiences. So, for example, whether it's through mental illness, transitioning, whatever your experience has been in life, people don't really want to be walked through those things, really. What they do want to know is, how did it impact you? How did it inspire you? How did it affect other people? They want to have the experience of going through those challenges without having to relive the bits that are really painful in that sense. And I think once we start to do that, and I like to see it as if you were to write the story of your life, about 14 sides of A4 is a 50-minute keynote. And 14 sides of A4 is 14 chapters. 14 chapters is a book, or book is a business. You never know where this stuff goes. But a great exercise for all of your kind of viewers and listeners right now, write the story of your life. But I don't want you to write it from a first-person perspective, not I did this and this happened to me. I want you to write it as if Morgan Freeman were narrating your life. And how cool would that be, by the way? So as if a narrator were actually kind of speaking about you. Then you start to see the value of your experiences to your audience. And that's, for me, is the difference. That also protects you emotionally as well. So many people decide to share their story, and it's so vulnerable and it's so painful for that person to deliver it, because they're not doing it from an audience perspective. They're doing it purely from a first person perspective. And I like that. And I think that tunes into something my nan used to tell me growing up, that if everybody put their problems into the middle of the room, you'd end up picking your own back, because you never know what other stuff is going on with other people. And especially in professional environments, because we mask it. How are you? I'm great, thanks. How are you? Try telling people you feel rubbish. See how fast they run.
Well, I think I've noticed in the space, the EDI space, the speaking space, whatever, where we both coexist, is that having a story or having a back, having a canon or whatever, is an in to the club, because I've realized that people are far more willing to share their vulnerability, their deepest secrets, their pain points, everything, really authentically and really vulnerably, because I come with my own membership card to that club. Whereas, in the past, you described yourself as a 47-year-old white man at the beginning of this show or just before we went online. I was in that position 13 years ago. I'm now a 60-year-old woman with a trans history and a previous existence. And in my old life, I didn't have a membership card to the vulnerability sort of hour.
Yeah.
I'd just be seen as a voyeur. But now I meet people and I understand marginalization. I understand the frustration of not having access to things, being denied things, being picked on, being bullied or abused or whatever it may be. And I can relate to someone who is a person of color, black, some person with disability. Obviously, I don't have their story, but I have that empathy bridge where I can go, I get it. I get what you mean by vulnerability. And they look back at me, they go, I know you get it. So it's that shared experience, isn't it?
It is. I think that the first 10 seconds of any interaction with anybody, the two things that people strive for are commonality and community. Why are you like me? Even if you seem completely worlds apart, why are you like me? And what value is it going to be for us to have this conversation, this talk, this keynote, whatever that thing is? I think that's a really important thing to master. And I think you're quite right. There's a common thread between a lot of issues that we experience in life, whether it be mental illness or pronouns, identity, transitioning, race, culture, sexuality. There's so many things that make us diverse and varied in life. The common factor for me is belonging. And it's essentially kind of a big reason why I do what I do now is that it affects our sense of belonging enough to feel that we're marginalized enough to not have a platform, to not have a voice, to not feel that we can step up. So for me, belonging is a common thread in all this. People that have not always had the platform to speak. And we can break this down into even just into the man-woman approach as well. That why is it that Find Your Voice, the conference that I run, that 80 to 90% are women, but then when we turn up at the conference events where it's stadium and conference hall events, still most of the speakers are 80, 90% male. There are disconnects everywhere. And the only way that we correct disconnects is by stepping up, creating a platform and finding our voices. So more power to your elbow, to the other people that speak about culture and race and sexuality and all these other things that other people need to know about. But I think there's a real big fear that we are losing the ability to ask questions from those people as well. So people that are not going through the experiences that other people have gone through, I think fueled by cancel culture and something we spoke briefly about before we hit record on this. I think we're really afraid of asking questions for the fear of being cancelled or being shamed or just saying the wrong thing. And I think that's something we need to maintain, the ability to ask better questions. I guarantee you that there's so much I don't understand in this world because it's just not been my experience. So you either blindly agree, not knowing what you're agreeing with, or you blindly disagree, where all your old generational biases run wild. Both are equally damaging. For me, the bit in the middle is find people that have lived this, find people that know this stuff, and ask them through a genuine need to educate or to be curious. And I guarantee, Joe, I've not been punched once. So that's a good sign. There's thousands of conversations I've had with people that are not like me, not been punched once. So that's my recommendation to everybody.
I mean, I'm the first to admit I have an opinion on most things, but I also realize that my opinion isn't always safe. I appreciate that it's my opinion. And there are certain things I don't want to have an opinion on. And it frustrates the producers out of people when I say, I'm sorry, I don't really have an opinion on that. And they say, well, you must have an opinion. You must have a thought. I said, well, I do have some biases. I have some stereotypes and I have some stories I could tell you about it. But really, persuade me. Give me your thoughts. I don't have a strong enough view to want to express it to anybody. And I think what happens in the world at the moment is everybody just feels licensed to express their opinions, whether they're safe or not.
I think you're right. I think it's the reason I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, /X, whatever it's called at the moment. I'm only on LinkedIn, and that's kind of where I hang out. Because of that very reason, I think there's so many platforms and it was interesting. There was a Harvard study done this many years ago that between 18 and 29-year-olds, social media was the biggest source of anxiety. But in the same survey with the same demographic from a mental health perspective, it was the biggest source of positive community for mental health. So actually, it's not the platforms per se, it's our immersion, our engagement in those platforms. people don't immerse well. They will end up doom scrolling or feeling worse. And that's why I left. In May 2020, I decided to leave social media. This was just after the pandemic and everything else had started. And people that I knew for decades were falling out on a public timeline, and there were really strong opinions flying around everywhere. I thought, I'm out. If you pick up your phone and 20 minutes later feel worse, that's not a good place to be. And I never went back. And I still exist commercially and personally, which is a good thing. People think you don't exist if you're not on those things. But I think you're right. It gives people a platform to share opinions that, okay, people are, I guess, entitled to an opinion. But it's how we decide to immerse in those things. If we feel sensitive about something, we will immerse ourselves in that thing and we damage ourselves. Or the other effect is the echo chamber effect, where we just surround ourselves with people like us and take that approach that you're either with me or against me kind of mentality, which to me, again, is equally damaging. So social media is an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I'd like your opinion on something, because I don't know if you noticed or realised, but I do some guest appearances on GB News, which
I did not know that. No.
Yeah, well, it's kind of as toxic as you get from an EDI professional and from a trans woman's perspective. And people criticise me for feeding the beast, if you like. My view is that if I'm not in the room, they're going to have that conversation anyway. Am I adding credibility to it being there, or am I taking the opportunity to say, hang on a minute, here's another alternative opinion? And that's my view. So my view is always go into the room, be a voice of alternative in a very measured, very balanced, very calm, very rational way, just to counteract the myths. Because my rationalization is I'll go anywhere toxic if I'm given a microphone and will be heard, even if I'm shouted down or abused while I'm on the stage, which has happened, just purely because there are people in the room who aren't hard right, hard left, hard ingrained, and they're open to hearing a different view. And I think we owe it to those people to give them another voice. And that's why I do it. So I don't know if you've ever been in that situation where you've had to walk away.
Firstly, I admire your strength and resilience, because in the spirit of honesty and again, we spoke about this before, for a publication I used to write for, it was an extremely kind of toxic forum, to the extent of I would post around mental health and somebody would say, I don't believe in mental health. I mean, what the hell does that mean? I mean, that's a whole something we haven't got time to go down right now, but and I withdrew myself from that. So actually, I would say this was many years ago, but I admire your strength and courage to do that. I personally, I would say I'm a reformed people pleaser, but I still get quite sensitive. And I think because I've built a business that's based on me, my personal story and stuff, I'm quite sensitive to that. But I do agree there are environments that are, I would say, comparable to what you're doing, whereas I will go and work for a large organization and get asked to speak to their teams and stuff. And I know they're doing it as a tick box exercise. I know there will be pushback. I know there will be people in that room that are usually, and again, without stereotyping, but generally it's true, it's the kind of the middle-aged or just older than me, maybe male, suited, booted, arms folded at the back. They're going to be the people that are going to say, we don't want to engage in this stuff. But like you were saying, I'd much rather be there affecting potentially one person than not be there at all. And I think that's the bit that you're doing brilliantly well, is that you're actually staying in that space. But interestingly, those arms folded, middle-aged white guys usually will come up to me afterwards and be the first people to open up about their challenges. They don't want to talk in open forum, but they very much want to talk in a private format. But I think that comes from vulnerability as well, that if you share your experiences and your insights and your stories unfiltered with honesty, you build trust and rapport with people instantly, to the extent that I can walk in and an hour later I've got somebody opening up about their life experiences to me. It's an amazing thing. So I think that's where vulnerability rocks, and you will be impacting people by what you do on GB News.
Yeah, and I echo what you're saying about the arms folded people in the room. And I've had clients brief me beforehand saying, "Oh, you got this person, this person, and this person. They're really kind of hard to deal with, and they're going to be really argumentative and push back, doubting all this." Okay, that's fine. I said, "You're not worried?" No, because in my experience, what I found is, as you said, these people are the ones that where change. You turn on lights, and I always frame my training, my talking is I'm never here to tell you what to do, what to think, what to say. That's for you. Change has to occur in you. All I want to do is turn some lights on, push the button and encourage you to think. And if you come away from it thinking that you don't agree with me, that's fine. I don't have to be right. I talk about perspectives and opinions, and I'm very honest to say that what I'm trying to do now is sell you my opinion. You have the right to choose to adopt it or not adopt it. So I can't tell you to challenge your own views and opinions than by telling you mine. And you find that these people warm to you. And I'd say the people that you think are going to be the toughest audience are actually the pussycats. Or if they are entrenched, they do some of my job for me because they ask these really direct, off the wall questions. And the whole room's going, blimey, I'm glad I'm more enlightened than they are.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they do my job for me by coming out with those tough questions. But no, I've always found that most people, as you say, set off by being kind. Nobody grows up wanting to be a dick. And generally they don't want to look like a dick in the middle of the room.
Exactly.
And they do come up afterwards and say, thank you, I've really learned something.
Because you're talking about something which is either sensitive to them or something which even can be considered as a taboo. There's so much generational stuff that's been handed down to us as taboo. I mean, even things like grief. I mean, later on today, I'm running a webinar with a counsellor on grief. And even with things like grief in the workplace, it's still taboo. Why is grief the taboo element? And the only way that you tackle these taboos is what you're doing, is you're going in, sharing a story, sharing experiences. And I love the fact that what you're saying is very much like myself. You're not solution focused in the way of you got to do this. This is going to help you. This is going to fix you. This is going to make you understand. You're giving people the ammunition to ask better questions of themselves. And I think that's where it stems from. As you say, nobody grows up as a clean slate with that intention to be a dick to people, but that's usually been handed down, just a generational belief. And also it doesn't mean to say that they're wrong. It just they need to change the way that they think and feel and understand other people's experiences and not like theirs.
I have people sort of come up to me and say, I don't get transes. I don't get non-binary. And I go, that's okay. I don't either. I don't understand it. If I could explain it and bottle it, I could flog it. But I don't understand it. All I can do is rationalize and say, I just am. I don't understand what it's like to be transmasculine. I don't understand what it's like to be non-binary because that's not my lived experience. I can tell you how I feel about me. A sample size of one. I can't argue about whether it's right, wrong, indifferent. I can't give you a medical explanation. All I can say is there's some sort of neurodivergence where my brain is wired and this makes sense. I can't explain it any further than that. So I think when people try and ask me to prove things, I go, well, there is no proof. It just is, like many things in this life.
They kind of come to you to feel that, right, okay, prove me wrong kind of mentality. It's like kind of very often if I take to the stage, like they look at me like, okay, beardy boy, entertain me. Whoa. Hopefully I will, but that's not exactly what I'm here, just to entertain you. I think that's an expectation thing. And also I like to explore, and I like the dynamics of delivering at a mandatory session as opposed to one of people that are there through choice. That's an interesting dynamic twist as well. Because actually what you find is that you have to, I used to run pubs in clubs back in the day, and I was always told to train in my security training, go for the biggest guy first. So I kind of take that same approach now to audiences. So if there is that one gobby one, or the one that's shouting out you're a dick, or the one with their arms folded, I go for them first. Then kind of everyone settles down a little bit then. But the mandatory one makes me laugh so much because actually you can tell that they just don't want to be there. They will be squirming at the fact that you're talking about such a personal experience because it's been an experience of them. Even I found this certainly, I was working with American Express with their diversity team a few years ago now. And we were talking about this very thing, that actually very often why people come into these roles of representing a section of society, a section of humanity, is because they have either experienced that directly or indirectly themselves. But by nature, you then become more sensitive to take on the burdens and the challenges of everybody else. So actually what it does, it increases the pressure on your own emotional well-being because you are flying the flag. So actually, if you look at mental health champions, for example, that by the time they get home, they have not only supported themselves, but 20 other people, and that's before they even get home. And home, it's not always a good place. So I think that people like ourselves that are actually out there championing things, trying to create thought leadership and stuff, there's an element of we do need to be more selfish as well. We need to make sure that we protect our own energy before we put ourselves into those situations. And I think for me, that's why I know my kind of resilience threshold when it comes to pushback. I don't get that much, to be honest, but I'm in true admiration of you, Joe, for having a lot higher threshold to put yourself into these situations. I mean, just GB News generally, that it's an amazing place for you to go into. I've got to tune in now.
I've got links. I capture the video. I record it myself, and I've got all the shows on. I've got a greatest hits collection, and I did a speaker show reel for Pride last year.
Yeah.
I clipped all of the intros. I'd like to welcome Joanne Lockwood. I had Jacob Rees-Mogg, I had Aaron Widdicombe, I had Patrick Christie's, I had all the kind of main presenters welcoming Joanne Lockwood. And I thought it was a great little Pride show reel intro. And then I posted, like people post testimonials on their show reels. I posted all the testimonials from X, all the negative testimonials. I was okay, who does this bloke think he is with that deep voice? This bloke is wrecking society. This bloke is killing our children. I posted those as testimonials on my show reels. Because if you're going to dance for the devil, you're going to get your ass burnt.
This is it. I'm trying to understand that rational leap between transitioning and you are killing our children,
or mutilating them, drugging them, ruining their future, sterilizing them. Really, I don't remember advocating for that.
Friend of mine, Ollie, he's a techie, so he kind of thinks this way anyway. He's kind of very much lost in AI completely, but he has this kind of phrase: if I say anything that people do that are just weird, he says people are idiots. So I will caveat that some people are idiots, and like I said, there's a lot of people that really don't deserve to have a voice, let alone find it.
Well, the thing is, you've got to respect the fact that people who we think are idiots don't think they're idiots themselves. You live within your own sense of self and your own echo chamber.
I'm putting myself out here, but it's people saying that you're killing their children. That's a pretty idiotic move, to be fair.
They equate me to Joseph
killing children, and a podcast be a great way to come out with for that.
Yeah. I'm advocating for it. I've had people write me posted letters. They've somehow tracked me down, worked out where I live, or my accountant, put a stamp on the envelope and written it and posted it to me. And then you go, oh, great, that's really lovely, thank you. Or they find my email address and I get it in my info box every so often. This is this kind of hate mail. But yeah, it's
interesting.
The way I box it off is I treat it as graffiti. You're driving through a rough part of town and there's spray paint on all the walls and it's got swear words, it's got this, it's got this. You go home and you're this. And you just put your foot down and just keep driving. So as far as I'm concerned, all these comments, they're just graffiti. They're not at me. They're just shouting at the world. I just happen to be the wall they're spraying it on. And it just wipe it off and go, well, you don't know me.
Yeah.
You've got no idea who I am. No fact in what you've said. So I can detach because it's not personal. They think it's personal, but it's not. Because it's sprayed on the wall as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting. Can I ask you a question? I appreciate this is your show.
Yeah, no.
This is what I get curious, you see. Would you say that the biggest challenge what to you personally was actual the decision to transition or the announcing of that transition to family, society, and the muggles that are out there right now? And again, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so I use the muggles very positively, by the way.
Yeah, the toughest thing was, I think, coming out to myself. So accepting and realizing who I was and working out when it was necessary. So I always say that when it became necessary, it became necessary. Before it was necessary, it was manageable. So it was that point when it became necessary. And then at that point there, I didn't so much transition. The world had to. So I'm still the eyes still see the same as everybody else. But it was my brother, mother-in-laws, all my friends, all my reputation, all my career. Those are the people that kind of got used to me. So, we talk about the social model or the medical model of disability. It's society that is the problem. For me, it was the world that had to realign its perspective of me. And all I had to do was just try and keep being the best me I could. So the world would align in the way I wanted to realign around me, to shift it by 180 something. So yeah, that was the challenge. So coming out initially, I did when I was drunk on Facebook. We talk about social media. So that kind of was ripping the sticky parts off pretty quick. And I then just woke up in the morning and then owned it. And yeah, I simplify it, but that's the headline, the jovial kind of get the audience laughing type headline. But yeah, what I realized very early on was the challenge wasn't me. It was the impact on my family, close family. That was the hardest bit, where I thought it was all about me, but actually I realized it wasn't. It was all about everybody else. And they needed more help than I did. And, cause you see these things, social media is very good at this, YOLO. If they're not with you, they're against you. You've got to get on with life and bugger them if they're not up for it. You just walk away. It's toxic. And I can see people who've taken that attitude and they're walking alone. Whereas I decided, well, I didn't want to walk alone. I wanted to be selfish and have what I had. And when that's your objective, you take a different approach. I always say, in order to be liked, you have to be likable. In order to be loved, you have to be lovable. In order to be respected, you have to be worthy of that respect. And all that I had the power in myself to be likable, lovable, and worthy of respect. Not anybody else. Everybody else could then take me. I've used this expression several times like this: skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is. If that's where I want to be, that's where I've got to head. And don't expect people to come to me and just accept me for who I was. So that was the important lesson. But a lot of that was epiphanies and realizations based on the feedback from my wife, feedback from my daughter, especially, who gave me a bit of a mental slap around the face and said, wake up and smell the coffee. You're a dick. If you want us to see you differently, behave differently.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I appreciate that.
No, as we started diving a bit deeper, you mentioned your mental health challenges. You mentioned your OCD. OCD is a term that's batted around often. People, I got to put that. Oh, it's my OCD. It's my OCD.
Yeah.
And yeah, we obviously appreciate there's a difference between people stealing that phrase for they move their pencil 2 inches. So I like it to have feng shui and align with something. But on what you had, can you just tell me, or tell the listeners, what is OCD?
Yep.
From your perspective?
I think so. Obsessive compulsive disorder. So OCD, I think much trivialized due to Channel 4's OCD cleaners, as you say, or I'm a little bit OCD. It doesn't kind of work that way. It's a very painful, frustrating condition. It's so I developed it at the age of 7, and after witnessing a family accident, and I think anybody who's experienced any form of mental illness, very often it can be chemical, of course, but very often it comes from a very severe action, produces a very severe reaction. So OCD is the ultimate pursuit of the uncontrollable. So how it manifested was I started to check gas switches in sets of 3, light switches in sets of 3, locks in sets of 3, with that feeling of comfort is the desired outcome. But the other outcome was, and it's the fear that drives you, is that if I didn't do these things, I would bring harm or even kill my family, because the situation was family related. So therefore it's kind of like assumed protection of the family through going through these checks and measures, which sounds hugely irrational to people that have not experienced that. But I think there's something in that. The rationality goes out the window when obsession and compulsion are thrown into the mix. So it's kind of like a routine that you have to do, and it fuels high anxiety. So through education, into my kind of teens, I was fueled by high anxiety. I think that's the kicker, though, really, that you see this a lot in professional life, and I write a lot about this in kind of HR publications such as yourself, and that we can be highly successful and highly performing, fueled by high anxiety, but you can only run for so long until you stop, and therein lies the problem. I also think that it's taught me a lot about the way I speak, and like yourself and what you just said, I'm not solution focused. So actually, I don't share what anxiety and an obsession compulsion is. I share what it does. So do you constantly ruminate on things that have gone wrong before, past relationships, past conversations, past decisions, and you replay them with a very real, very current feeling of guilt and remorse and regret. And what it does, it changes your narrative enough to start to then catastrophize what's to come. So again, you wake up that feeling of fear and dread of everything that you're doing. It's all going to go wrong. And I think that's why in my current life, and I focus so much on one thing, I don't coach presentation skills. That's not really my thing. What I coach is transformation through speaking. You change your narrative, you change your experience. But it came from OCD. And I think there's something in that. And from what you've brilliantly shared as well, Joe, that from ultimate chaos can come magic. From the biggest of adversities can come the most exciting things. But let's not beat around the bush here. Both of those things could have easily destroyed somebody as well. And I think there's something in that the same thing that can be the destructive force in somebody's life can also be the catalyst for positive change if we only use it in the right way. And that's why I focus so much on narrative, because I think for me, OCD is fueled by negative narrative. It's fueled by high anxiety, but also there's a word I'm struggling for here, intrusive thoughts.
Are you aware that it is a false belief? Are you aware that you're trying to doubt yourself all the time, going, I know this is wrong, but I can't stop myself? Is it a feeling of powerlessness that you can't override it?
Yeah, I think certainly, and it has to be said, with professional help, certainly in later years, it actually makes you kind of question everything in that sense. I always say to people now, one of the best things we can do is set out on a mission to prove ourselves wrong and actually realize that most of the things that we get anxious about never happen. I mean, I use the example in 2012 after my breakdown, I kept something called a worry journal. It sounds weird, but go with me. It's a really like messed up version of a gratitude journal. I wrote down everything that made me highly anxious or the byproducts of high anxiety. So like defensive and aggressive behavior, jealousy and insecurity were huge in my world, erratic behavior, lethargy, lack of energy. And on day one, there were 128 entries. And 2 weeks later, welcome to OCD. 2 weeks later, I kind of checked back on day one, and of those 128 things, absolutely none of them happened. And the more that I started to prove myself wrong, when that pattern starts to come in, I can then start to change the narrative enough to say, actually, no, because it didn't happen last time. It's the same as, I'm sure everybody here has had that feeling that they left the oven on, they left the door unlocked. It's kind of like that on repeat in that sense. But the more that we start to kind of check these things, if I'm tired and stressed, and the reason I say I have OCD even now, it never goes. If I'm tired enough, stressed enough, shocked enough, I actually developed it again after having a road accident a few years ago, but I come back very quickly. If I check something more than twice, I have to physically stop myself because I will fall back into that routine. I do a roadshow with an amazing, what I call my neuroboffin, Helen. She says that when we create anxiety about things, we damage ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally as if it were actually happening anyway. So we're kind of damaging ourselves multiple times about the same situation. So one of the main kind of points of what I speak about now is to fact check our anxieties. And actually, is this fact or is it the story that we're telling ourselves? And if it is the story that we're telling ourselves, we can change that story. And if it's fact, go for closure. I always use the example of the text message. So if you've ever had a row with somebody really close to you by text message, iMessage, or WhatsApp, the 3 dots causes far more anxiety than the actual end of that conversation. And what about the disappearing 3 dots? So much anxiety. But the end of that conversation is never that bad. And this is the thing, we were constantly assuming worst case outcomes. So my advice to people listening and watching this today, set out on a mission to prove yourself wrong. You'll be surprised at how little actually happens.
Yeah, I use that kind of expression. There's a forecaster called Paul Sappho, and he coined the phrase strong opinions are weakly held. And part of that is, yes, you're allowed your opinions, but go out to the world believing you're wrong and trying to prove you're wrong rather than start believing you're right, trying to prove you're right. It's a bit like, that's what scientists do. They put a theory out there and they try and prove each other wrong, and they welcome criticism and peer reviews, and everyone who's done a PhD has to justify their opinions with people saying you're wrong, and they have to stand up and defend it. So, yeah, most people want to be right. Most conversations are about selling my opinion to you, even if it's just, it's nice weather. I'm selling you that belief that the weather's nice, and you're going to go, well, it's a bit cloudy. So you're giving me your opinion back, and you try and analyze a conversation that doesn't have an opinion or a belief in it. It doesn't
Very
happen.
true. Yeah, very true. I mean, it's important to say that I do share what I call lived experience playbook tips. So they're not advice by any stretch, and they're not solutions. if you are having thoughts which are intrusive or causes you pain or frustration, absolutely reach out for professional help. I would strongly recommend that, of course, ethically, morally, and also for insurance purposes. That's my disclaimer. But I think there's something in that with what we both do. We're there to share lived experience. I think for me, lived experience. I was speaking at the CIPD Workplace Wellbeing Conference last week in London, and one of the main drivers of the message there was lived experience being the perfect vehicle to drive engagement to help, or to solutions or insights or community, but is not the answer. I think the worrying thing for me is I see a lot of people, especially in the mental health space, because that's a space I'm in mainly, they're taking on that responsibility of helping people at their most vulnerable without the qualifications, training, or skills to actually help that person. I think for me, it's really about communicating our niche and our the reason why we're there. And obviously for both of us, it's kind of what we do. We give people our experiences. We give people our lived experience. We share what works, what hasn't worked. And I think people really like that. But it's just a vehicle to reach out for help. Our role is to get people to a point of engaging in, for me, certainly the proper solutions. And for you, it's actually changing thoughts, changing minds. I mean, one of the things that I find people that have been through experiences in their lives find most difficult to start with is trying to engage with people that don't think like them, and actually quite bluntly and sometimes, as you say, abusively don't agree with them as well. That could be really challenging sometimes. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with, you've mentioned kind of like the letters and stuff that you get, but how do you deal with the kind of what I call the low level toxicity, the little pushbacks that you get? Do you ever get that in person as well? I know this is your show, but I'm also very curious.
No. I welcome the question. I mean, out of all of my experience, I've only ever had one or two occasions where someone was made a point in one of my training sessions. They objected to me using the word cis as a prefix. Cis is opposite of trans. And they got really angsty about that word and the fact that I used gender identity or gender when I should have been talking about sex and the Equality Act. And they said, I don't have a gender identity. I said, that's great. I've got a lot of my friends who are non-binary who don't subscribe to gender either. That's fine. And that really blew their brains out. I was agreeing with them in a way. But they caught me unawares. And I'll admit now that I had to go out and have a bit of a toilet break and recompose myself because I was not used to dealing with that hostility. But what disappointed me most was in a room full of people, nobody spoke up. Nobody said anything. And afterwards, they all came up to me and said, "Oh, you okay? Were you okay?" And they told me this person was opinionated, awkward. They were a lot of trouble in the organisation. I thought, well, someone could have briefed me. Someone could have just mentioned that. Someone could have pointed it out. Someone, there were senior people in that room, could have addressed that with that person. And I felt hung out to dry a bit. So yeah, it has happened. But I suppose I'm better prepared because I always go into spaces. Use the percentage, 15%. 15% of people have racist, have sexist views, have views that are off main kilter. Look at the bell curve in normality. There's always going to be the 15% top, 15% bottom. So I always expect getting on a bus, there's 15% of the people not going to like me. Walk into a room, I have 100 people, 15 people in that room are not going to like me. So I go in with that kind of defense mechanism pre-primed. And most of the time, 99% of the time, it's the anxiety that never occurs. And so I don't let it scare me. I manage that anxiety by just knowing that I've got my plan B in my back pocket if it happens. Right, now I can show my plan B card. I know how to deal with that. I've got an exit strategy. And generally my exit strategy is don't engage the trolls. If you feed the troll, the troll grows. If you give it oxygen, which counteracts what I'm saying on GP News sometimes. No, one-on-one, people don't. I had an incident where someone doorstopped me, I suppose to use a politician term, at a festival conference. They wanted my opinion on trans people in sport. I'm not a sports person. I don't do elite. I don't run. I maybe go do recreational swimming, go for a bit of gym work, but I'm not a sports person. I don't have a strong opinion on trans competitions in sport. I realize it's polarized. I realize I can produce a report that says this, and you can produce a report that says that, and we're arguing scientific reports, and I don't know which is best. So this person wanted me to sort of acquiesce to their view that it was all wrong, it was cheating. I said, well, look, I don't want to argue with you. It's not my specialist subject. There's balance of a view here. They go, it's good. They were determined to have an argument with me, and I said, I don't owe you an argument, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. And we talk about something else, but I don't owe you an argument, and I'm not going to argue on this. So yeah, that's how I would respond.
On behalf of everybody, isn't it?
Sorry, you broke up.
It's kind of like they want you to answer on behalf of the whole community.
Yeah, you represent every single trans person in the world, and yeah, every person lived experience is different, and it's in the same way your anxiety, your OCD is unique to you, how you experienced it. It must have been immensely frustrating for people who loved and cared for you or knew you, having a rational view of what you were doing, saying, come on, Nick, can't you see this is, can't you just hold your breath, try and cure your hiccups? Can't you just do, everyone's got a cure, haven't they?
They have. And I think it has to be said, I come from a very loving family. I'm very lucky that way. Interestingly, my memory isn't great. I had to look back on NHS records to see kind of like the date of diagnosis and everything else that happened along the way, and I could speak into my mum and everything else. So growing up day to day, I can't remember actually how it felt. But as I came into the late teens, I do very much remember that, because obviously it's a very memorable period. But they were great. But interestingly, I think societally, which is why I asked you the question about kind of societal kind of expectations, you get labeled as something. And we do this, especially with kids. He's a warrior. He's sensitive. And of course, that reaffirms then the belief that I am like that anyway. So it becomes kind of just part of the norm and part of what you do. When I first started to address this, and again, with professional help, I actually had to kind of speak to everybody and say, look, if I ask you for reassurance once, answer me. If I ask you for reassurance again, don't answer me. Because if anybody here has had experiences of OCD, you'll know that reassurance lasts for about 20 minutes. So I think family have always been very supportive. Obviously, I got treated, I got counselling, everything else in my childhood. But I think it wasn't addressed because of just the way that the medical services were not lined up then. I mean, I'm 47 now, so this is a long time ago. It was only really when I started to address this in 2012, I started to make real kind of inroads using current day therapy, CBT, and lots of other things that are available now that just weren't available mainstream then.
Do you perceive it was already innate within you and there was a trigger event that set it off, or do you think it was a learned behavior later in life from a trigger event, or do you think some of your anxiety, some of your upbringing has kind of made you vulnerable to developing this kind of mental health challenge?
Great question. The trigger point was, as I understand it, well, obviously I can't remember before that, but as I understand it, the trigger point was the accident with my sister and seeing that happen. I would say that the what I call flare-ups since, in a major way, have always happened at high points of stress. So there's an element of me which kind of feels that maybe that's my default setting, that I go straight back to that point. But it's kind of like you're trying to control everything. And I think, again, that links in with just general anxiety. And everybody that has that level of anxiety, you try and control everything and everyone. And that only compounds the level of anxiety you're experiencing, because you cannot control anybody or anything. And the pursuit of doing so will only create extra damage. So it's a really interesting one. Maybe that is my default setting. I kind of reference them now as Indiana Jones mining cart tracks. They're always there. But if I get shunted back onto them, I know it's come back quicker. I say Indiana Jones. I mean, I'm that generation.
To the exit now. Is that what you're saying? It's like a 1980s computer game where you're trying to wander around trying to find the exit, and you know where the exit is. You turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, and there it is. Yeah.
I love that reference, Joe. I'm a big gamer myself, so I do love that reference. It's really cool.
I was just thinking about my own sort of the way I would handle things, and I think over my life, I may have gone through moments in my life where I was acquiring stress and pressure, and everything was doom and gloom. There's no way out. How do I cope with this? And then I think I didn't do what you did, which is write down all these things that you worry about and then realize they hadn't happened. I think my brain just was able to go, that's not real, that's not real, that's not real. And I think I've recalibrated my pressure valve, whereas it used to have a high tolerance for pressure. And now it blows really, really quickly. I go, not worth it. It's like sticking a knife in a car tire. It just deflates quickly. And I have a fuck it. Yeah, don't care. I'm out. Just poof, not playing. And it's allows me to sort of de-escalate things very quickly.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. A friend of mine, Zoe, she says I put it in front of the itty bitty shitty committee.
And
the brain is doing the.
Got a jar of fucks to give. It's like,
I gotta get one of them. That's pretty cool.
I've only got so many, and it's like for special people, I have a jar of hugs though as well. So these are things I want to get.
Big fan of hugs. I'm a big fan of that. So that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, I think put it in context that you when you want to use fucks or spoons or whatever it is, you've only got so much you can give without it eating into you, isn't it? I'm not prepared to give you that fuck. I'm afraid. Sorry, it's not yours. I don't want it. It's mine.
Yeah. There is. But I think that takes a level of confidence and self-esteem. I think when people go through an adversity or a huge period of change, I think that actually two of the things that are impacted for a lot of people are self-esteem and confidence, that not feeling they have the right to reserve your fucks in this sense. There's something really empowering about finding your voice. I think there's something really empowering about being able to own your story in a way that you've taken control of the narrative in that sense. I love that. I think that's such a cool thing. And when combined with seeing what the value is in your story to other people, because actually, interestingly, the value to other people may not be something you consider important. Maybe it's such a small part of your journey, but when you start to see it from an audience perspective, there's something in your experiences, Joe, which really resonates with people. And interestingly, and again, this came up in conversation yesterday with a client, that I could deliver the same talk to the same audience 4 times and have 4 different outcomes, because if that one person in the audience is going through a marital problem, they're going to pick up on the bit when I talk about personal relationships. Next time round, it could be a professional problem, and they'll ignore the other bit. So it's not about what we say to people. Sorry to shatter our egos here. It's about the receiver. It's about where they are and actually what they want to pick up from that.
Yeah, how you make people feel. It's how you move them from A to B. It is. And I think I'm the same as you. I stand on stage and I've got a start and end, and I've got a rough map of how I'm going to get from start to end.
Yeah.
A lot of it just depends on who smiles at me. If I say something and someone smiles at me, I go, okay, we'll just go into that a bit more. I'll talk to you for a bit, and someone else will smile and I'll talk to them for a bit. And it's different people will smile at different times or nod, and you just feed off the audience. And I think that's the important thing. If I know I've got one person listening, I'm going to keep talking to that one person.
Yeah, I think it's a musician thing. Is like you riff with your content. You know what's landing, so you stay in that. And I love that. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done a TEDx because you have to learn it off by heart and practice it and demo it. And I don't do the same talk twice. I've got the same themes. I've got my Lego bricks that I can make a fire station out of. But today I might want to make a racing car. It's still the same bricks.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. TED's an interesting one. As a disclaimer, I do enjoy TED Talks, TEDx Talks, but they do, as you say, follow the same kind of format and the same kind of outcome and stuff. I prefer more free-flowing. So in the same way that people like Toastmasters have an amazing space in the world for presentation skills and stuff, for me, it's finding somebody's voice and amplifying them. It's not about kind of this conveyor belt of making rinse and repeat speakers and the way that they deliver and the way that they format. I'm very much like you, Joe, that I'll have a big image behind me on the screen and then I'll work out where I'm going to go with this when I'm actually in front of people. And I think there's something in it as well that you've probably had the same experience, that there's things in my head, do a lot of thinking when I'm traveling and creating like new talks and stuff. And there's something I think this is going to be brilliant. When I say this is going to be such a laugh, be rolling in the aisles, nothing, tumbleweeds everywhere. And there's things that I've tripped over on stage which just work because done it just and that stays in. So that's why I always say that your story is an evolution, that it evolves with you and the world and the audience and society and Donald Trump and everything else is experiencing in the world right now. There all has an element of it changes the way that our story is told. It doesn't make your story wrong. It doesn't make your story disingenuous or not original. It just means that you're adapting it to where your beliefs and where your thoughts and insights are coming from now.
Yeah, my brain's I think in pictures and metaphors, which work in my head, they don't always work in other people's heads. But I think I was on stage once and someone asked me this question. So how do you handle it when people are over enthusiastic or whatever the phrase was? And I said, well, I'd rather ride a bucking bronco than drag a nag. So at least with a bucking bronco, you've got some energy. You can work with it. You can tame it. You can direct the energy. With a nag, just towing it along, you're doing all the work. He doesn't want to be there. And people come up to me after and say, "Oh, I've written that down and don't ride bucking bronco, drag a nag." And it's just something that popped into my head when someone asked me a question, and it's become something I've used often.
I like that. It's not a quote I thought I was going to get today, but I like that.
And I don't know about you, but you find yourself using these quotes. You think you've made them up, and then other people use them. You think, have you listened to my stuff, or have I listened to your stuff, or is it just a really good conversation?
I quite openly own my kind of complete copying because they're usually country music songs. I'm a huge country music fan. It's kind of my thing. I love kind of Nashville and everything else. And so a lot of my quotes and talk titles are country music songs. I think actually by owning it, I know that I'm not certainly not blatantly copying somebody else I've listened to. But I think you're right. I think that, so the quote that I love is every storm runs out of rain. And I use that at the end of every talk, but I kind of make a joke of the fact it's not mine. It's a great country song by Gary Allan. Check it out. But I think you can have 10 speakers sharing the same sentiment from the stage and have 10 different impacts, because it's not about what we say, it's about how we make people feel and how you deliver it, and the genuine, authentic, vulnerable Joe that's sharing that statement will be very different from somebody else. I always kind of liken it to scripted sales calls. No, it's disingenuous. You don't buy into it. You treat it with the respect it deserves. Like usually you pull the cable out the wall. Or you see an amazingly polished speaker at a conference. Politicians are great at this. Amazingly polished, but you can't buy into it. You can't emotionally buy into it because you just know it's kind of, or you see that kind of sales speaker at a conference and they'll give you an amazingly polished talk, then run to the back of the room, now it's only £10,000. They've lost you because it's disingenuous. And I think that's the bit that we need to explore. More people like you, Joe, where you are leading, I call it emotional leadership and emotional storytelling. You're taking people on a journey through feeling what you're saying, not hearing the words per se. I think people will very rarely remember what I've said, but they'll know how I make them feel. And that's the bit that sticks with people.
I let you into a secret. I very rarely remember what I've said myself. It just, it comes out of a bit of my brain, comes out of my mouth, but it doesn't go through the memory part. And it's like, I've taken to recording. I've got a little mic I clip onto my lapel sometimes on my dress when I'm speaking, and I transcribe it afterwards and look back and go, oh, that was actually some good stuff in there, wasn't it?
So, I like that. It's a great idea, because usually I just end up slipping the videographer a couple of £100 to get the raw footage. Actually, recording my own is a good shout. That's a great tip.
Yeah, I've got an app on my phone and I've got a little mic. I just clip it on and just tip my phone to record. And then I upload it into AI and it transcribes it. It comes up with takeaways. And I often give my speaker booker, I said, I not only talk, I'll give you an FAQ, a terminology and an output, takeaways from my talk. Go back, drag and drop, cut it and paste it into Word, PDF it and send it off to the speaker booker.
Yeah.
There's something for your audience.
But that's because you're creating an experience. You're not just giving a talk. You're creating an experience where people get genuine value from that. But again, you see, I'm sure you've been at these conferences speaking as well. You see so many speakers that just kind of like come on and do the slides and the whole Chris Whitty thing and then go again. And it's like, what actually happened there? We can't remember what he said or what was covered, but okay, who's next? And I think that's why when you get somebody with genuine emotion comes on, it really enlivens the room. It really wakes people up, because actually what you're talking about is a human experience, and not people that have had the same experience as you very often, but people that are just intrigued by. We have been brought up and for generations on storytelling, good and bad, but it's the stories that we tell people. And I think your ability to change the dynamic in the room is absolutely a superpower, because You know it's true. When we've been in that open plan office and that really angry person walks in, that stuff ripples. When really happy person walks in, that stuff ripples. You can change the environment with your words immediately. But it's the emotion that really people tune into. That's what they feel. Yeah, I can't wait to see one of your talks now, Joe.
Well, when we hang out this, we'll have to exchange some notes. Maybe we'll collaborate on something.
Sounds good. We'll do a double that.
Yeah. Nick, it's been absolutely fascinating chatting away. And
love that. Thank you.
It's nice to find a kindred spirit, and we share a lot of common values, beliefs, and thoughts. And thank you for going deep on your mental health and your OCD. And I have to admit, I was a bit curious, and I thank your vulnerability for sharing it with me and the audience. So yeah, thank you. So Nick,
likewise, Joe. Thank you. Lovely to meet you as well, and thanks to everybody else for tuning in as well.
How do people get hold of you?
Nice and simple, just like me. www.nickelston.com. You'll find everything on there. I'm not on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just if you're on LinkedIn, you can connect with me on there for sure.
And also look up your articles on HR Zone, Training Zone, and publications such as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stay tuned for those. And I'll be digging deep into your archive as well. So I really like the cut of your jib.
Excellent.
This could easily turn into a carry-on film.
Nick, thank you.
Thank you.
As we bring this conversation to a close, I want to express my deepest gratitude to you, our listener, for lending your ear and heart to the cause of inclusion. If today's discussion struck a chord, consider subscribing to Inclusion Bites and become part of our ever-growing community, driving real change. Share this journey with friends, family, and colleagues. Let's amplify the voices that matter. Got thoughts, stories, or a vision to share? I'm all ears. Reach out to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk and let's make your voice heard. Until next time, this is Joanne Lockwood, signing off with a promise to return with more enriching narratives that challenge, inspire, and unite us all. Here's to fostering a more inclusive world, one episode at a time. Catch you on the next bite.